I spent 4 decades whispering in libraries. I knew the Dewey Decimal System better than I knew myself. And then, one day, at 68, I stood up in front of strangers and made them laugh. Not polite chuckles, real belly-deep laughter. It felt like I'd been holding my breath for 40 years. This is not a story about chasing fame. It's about finding your voice when everyone, including you, forgot you had one. And if you think it's too late to change, I'm here to tell you. It's later than you think. And that's the best time to begin. I always liked silence. It made sense to me. Predictable, safe. I became a librarian straight out of college and never looked back. Books didn't interrupt. People mostly left you alone. It suited me. There was a certain peace in shelving, in knowing where everything belonged. I wore soft-soled shoes and cardigans with pockets. My lunch breaks were always the same, and for a long time I told myself that was contentment, that not needing much was a kind of strength. I thought I had everything I needed. The smell of old paper, the hush of the aisles, the comfort of a world that never demanded too much. I wasn't funny, not even close. I was serious, responsible, invisible, maybe, but reliably so. And after a while I convinced myself that was enough. I didn't tell stories, I sorted them. Other people had sparkle, punchlines, timing. I had order. That was my identity. The woman who remembered due dates, who kept her voice down, who didn't take up space. I never raised my hand in meetings, never made a scene. If something hurt, I swallowed it. If something made me laugh, I laughed softly to myself. I was convinced joy was something you didn't show too loudly, especially not at my age. One day, I looked up and realized I'd been working in the same building for 38 years. I had a cardigan older than my niece's kids. Life had passed like pages in a novel I barely remembered reading. Birthdays, holidays, retirements. They all came and went in a quiet blur. I never hated my job, but I don't think I ever really loved it either. It was just what I did, what I knew. And then suddenly it was over. I packed my things into 2 boxes, handed in my keys, and walked out the door like it was any other day. No parade, no meltdown, just a long silence that followed me home. People respected me. They called me Miss Miriam, even when I was 60. I gave good book recommendations. I kept the noise down. I was the keeper of order, the protector of quiet. Neighbors assumed I liked it that way, that I'd go on tending my garden and reading my novels and maybe joining a book club if I got bored. And for a while, I tried. I really did. I played the role, smiled politely, kept my pantry neat. I told myself retirement was a well-earned rest, that peace was the reward. But underneath the calm, I was starting to itch, like something inside me was growing restless. But inside, I was starting to feel hollow. Not sad exactly, just unused. Like a good teapot that nobody bothered to fill anymore. The kind that sits on the shelf looking elegant but forgotten. My days were quiet, yes, but also airless. Sometimes I didn't speak to anyone until evening. My voice started to feel like an old machine, rusty, tentative, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd missed something. Not a career opportunity or a romance, but something softer, something to do with expression, with joy, with letting myself be a little foolish. I didn't know what that meant yet, just that I'd gone quiet too long. When I retired, people brought cupcakes and balloons. They smiled. I smiled. Then they left. And I went home. And for the first time in decades, I had no one to shush, no due dates, no purpose. The house was too quiet, even for me. I kept thinking I was forgetting something, A meeting, a phone call, a task. But there was nothing, just silence that didn't feel peaceful anymore. I didn't cry. I didn't fall apart. But something went dim. It was like I'd been erased, not just from the library system, but from the rhythm of the world. Nobody needed me to open a door or fix a printer. I wasn't missed. I was simply done. The days got blurry. I'd wake up late. I'd reread books I'd already memorized. I started talking to myself in the kitchen and answering. I ate lunch at 10:30 and dinner at 4. The clock stopped mattering. I'd forget what day it was, sometimes even what month. It felt like I was slowly dissolving, like sugar in a cup of tea, still there, but invisible. I wasn't unhappy exactly, just untethered. I couldn't remember the last time I laughed, really laughed, or even raised my voice. I was drifting in a life that didn't require much of me, and I wasn't sure if that was peace or something closer to disappearing. I didn't ask myself, "What's next?" I asked, "Is this it?" But quietly. The way you ask a question you don't really want answered. I'd stare at the ceiling and feel time stretch out like a hallway with no doors. I wasn't longing for adventure or applause. I just wanted something to crack the stillness, to remind me I still had edges, that I hadn't flattened out entirely, that maybe somewhere inside this mild, quiet woman there was still a voice that hadn't spoken yet, but I didn't know how to find it. I wasn't even sure it would want to be found, so I stayed in the hush until something strange happened. It started with a mistake. A local flyer landed in my mailbox. Some senior center offering classes. Tai Chi, painting, and oddly enough, intro to stand-up comedy. I almost tossed it out with the junk mail, but I didn't. I read it again, then again. There was something absurd about it. Comedy for people my age? People with hip replacements and pill organizers? It made me smile, but also ache a little, like someone had slipped a note under my door. Not for me, exactly, but close. Something about it felt offbeat, disarming, like a door I didn't know I wanted to open. I left the flyer on my kitchen table. I didn't plan to go. I mean, why would I? I hadn't been on a stage since the 8th grade talent show, and even then I just held someone else's props. But the words stuck with me. Stand-up comedy. What a strange thing to offer people who wear orthopedic shoes. Still, something about it itched at me. Not excitement. More like a dare whispered from the back of my mind. I wasn't looking to reinvent myself. I was just curious. Or bored. Maybe both. I circled the date on my calendar without really meaning to. I wasn't even sure I'd show up. But apparently a part of me had already decided. I told myself I'd just observe, just once, for the novelty. I wore my safest clothes, brought a notebook, and found a seat in the back. The room smelled like instant coffee and hand lotion. A few people chatted. Some looked just as nervous as I felt, and then someone handed me a mic. "Just try," they said. "No pressure." I could have said no. I should have, maybe. But I didn't. I held the mic like it might bite, cleared my throat, and told the only story that came to mind, about getting stuck in my compression tights. The room laughed. Not politely, not kindly. They laughed like they meant it. And something inside me cracked open. I don't even remember what I said. Something about Medicare and elastic waistbands. But they laughed. Hard. And something in me, something buried, cracked open. Not just because it was funny, but because it felt real. I wasn't pretending to be younger or cooler or wiser. I was just honest. Dry, maybe. A little awkward, but honest. And they responded to that. It wasn't the sound of laughter that surprised me. It was that it was for me, not at me. That it had waited all this time, dormant in some dusty corner of me, just waiting to be let out. And once it did, I knew I couldn't put it back. It felt dangerous, exhilarating, like being naked in a room full of strangers and not caring, like I was finally allowed to speak in full volume. I hadn't realized how long I'd been whispering my way through life, always shrinking, always polite, always appropriate. But with that mic in my hand, I got to say things we weren't supposed to say about aging, about sagging bodies, about loneliness and dentures, and the weirdness of being both invisible and too visible at the same time. And the strangest part? People didn't look away. They leaned in. They saw me, and I let them. I started going every week, writing jokes on sticky notes, practicing in the mirror. I was terrible at first, but terrible in a way that made me feel alive. I'd fumble the punchlines, lose my place. My hands would shake, but my voice, though uncertain, was finally mine. Not borrowed from a book, not echoing someone else's opinion, just mine. I wrote what I knew: sagging knees, grief, grocery store indignities, the deep absurdity of late-night infomercials. And slowly the fear began to fade. Not because I got better, but because it stopped mattering if I didn't. Still, part of me whispered, "This is foolish. You're too old to be starting something. Comedy is for the young, the loud, the brave." I'd lie awake thinking, who do you think you are? I wasn't trained. I wasn't polished. I didn't even have social media. That voice, the one that kept me quiet for decades, didn't disappear overnight. It got louder the more I stepped outside what I was supposed to be. And it wasn't just doubt. It was shame dressed up as logic, telling me to sit back down, to age quietly, to make space for people who still had time to matter. But I kept coming back, not because I believed in myself, but because for the first time in years, something believed in me. The room, the stage, the other comics, all older than I expected, all scared, all raw. I didn't know what I was becoming, but I knew I didn't want to disappear again. That little spark, the one that flickered with each laugh, it felt sacred, like a lifeline. I wasn't chasing success. I was chasing voice, not performance, but presence. Just standing there, saying something that felt true, even if my hands still trembled every time I stepped up. One night, someone filmed me during open mic. I did a bit about colonoscopies and dating apps for seniors. It ended up online, 200,000 views, overnight. I didn't even know it had been posted until my neighbor's granddaughter showed me. "You're hilarious," she said. I didn't know how to respond. Suddenly, strangers were emailing me, inviting me to perform, asking me for advice. At first, I panicked. I wasn't trying to be known. I was just trying not to vanish. But it turns out telling the truth, even awkward, wrinkly, creaky truth, is something people crave. Even from someone like me. Maybe especially. At first I was mortified. The video felt like exposure, like someone had turned me inside out and uploaded it. I didn't want people to see my sagging arms or hear my crooked delivery. But then I read the comments. And they weren't cruel. They were grateful. People said, "She's saying what I'm afraid to. My mother needs to see this. I've never laughed so hard at something so real." And slowly shame turned to pride. I wasn't polished or perfect, but I was saying something that mattered. And more than that, people needed it. I felt useful again. I realized comedy wasn't about punchlines. It was about truth. The kind of truth that's too sharp to say directly, so you wrap it in a joke and let it land softly. Humor doesn't ignore pain. It threads a light through it. A laugh is just a breath you weren't holding anymore. And for people like me who've spent years being quiet, it's a form of defiance, of release. I didn't need to be edgy or clever or fast. I just had to be honest. My body, my age, my fears, they weren't liabilities. They were material. And through humor, they became something lighter, bearable, even beautiful. I wasn't alone anymore. I met other late bloomers. Women who had raised families, buried husbands, survived cancer, endured silence. Men who'd never cried until they stepped on stage and accidentally made us all laugh through it. We weren't trying to be stars. We were trying to connect, to say the unsaid. It became a kind of communion. We laughed and cried in the same breath. It was church, with cursing. And through it all, I found something I'd never had before, not just company, but kinship. People who didn't just hear me, but mirrored something back, something tender, something true. Someone asked me to lead a class. Me? A teacher? I'd spent my life whispering among bookshelves, not standing at the front of a room, but I said yes, and something clicked. I wasn't passing on technique. I was giving permission. I watched women in their 70s make rooms howl with laughter, not because they were chasing approval, but because they were claiming space. One woman said, "I haven't heard my own voice in years." Another wrote a bit about arthritis that made us weep from laughter. I didn't give them talent. I gave them the light to stand in, and they rose. I used to whisper for a living. Please lower your voice. No talking in the reading room. I was the keeper of quiet, but now I help others speak out, loudly, awkwardly, fearlessly, not to be famous, not to go viral, just to be heard, just to stand in front of others and say, here I am, still alive, still funny, still me. There's no right age for a voice to arrive, and when it does, it doesn't ask for permission. It roars, and it heals. I've seen it happen again and again. Quiet people lighting up like bonfires, not to perform, to exist. I don't have a Netflix special. I don't tour arenas. But I have a little class in a community center where every Wednesday someone tells their truth, and we laugh until we cry. And to me, that's more than enough. I see courage every week. People risking embarrassment for the sake of connection. People saying things they never thought they could say out loud, not to be applauded, but to be understood. This isn't success the way the world defines it. It's quieter, gentler, but no less real. It's a life I didn't plan, and yet somehow the one that finally fits. It's not the career shift that changed me. It's that I finally stopped filtering myself. I stopped asking, is this appropriate? And started asking, is this me? For decades, I shaped myself around what was expected. Quiet, helpful, proper. But comedy unraveled that. It didn't require polish. It required honesty. And once I stopped trying to be who I thought I was supposed to be, I found someone underneath I actually liked. Not for being impressive, but for being real. The change wasn't external. It was internal. It was in how I sat with myself, how I spoke, how I stayed. I lost invisibility. I gained awkwardness, failure, feedback, and light. I lost the safety of being small. I gained the risk of being seen. I lost the comfort of silence, but I found my voice, and with it, a strange and beautiful mess. It was never about becoming someone new. It was about reclaiming parts of myself that had been waiting under the weight of politeness, responsibility, decades of deferring. When I look back, I don't miss what I left behind. I only wish I'd found this earlier, but maybe I couldn't have. Maybe this was always the timing. People talk about aging like it's a thief, but for me, time didn't take. It revealed. It peeled back the layers I thought were necessary, and beneath them was someone who still had questions, still had hunger, still had guts. I used to think I was too old to change, too late to start, but aging was what made it possible. It stripped away the pressure to impress, the need to be perfect, and in that freedom I found room to be playful, to take up space. Time isn't the enemy. Time is the mirror. And if you're lucky, it shows you who you really are. Here's the truth. No one ever said, "It's your turn now." No one told me it was okay to start performing or teaching or being seen, especially not at 70. We're taught to shrink with age, to disappear gracefully. But grace isn't the same as silence, and silence isn't the same as peace. If you're waiting for permission, stop. You'll be waiting forever. I gave it to myself, nervously, imperfectly, but fully. And that's what changed everything. You don't need applause or approval. You just need to say, "I'm allowed to exist," loudly, fully, right now. If there's something inside you that wants to be said, say it. Even if your voice shakes. Especially if your voice shakes. Because the shaking means it matters. It means it's real. You don't need to be funny or wise or polished. You just need to be true. Someone out there is waiting for your story, not because it's perfect, but because it's yours. You have survived things. You have learned things, and the world needs more of that. So speak, stand, write, try. Not for success, but for wholeness. Not to impress, to connect. This isn't a story about stand-up. It's a story about standing up for your voice, for your story, for the parts of you that got quiet too soon. Comedy was just the path. The real journey was showing up to my own life, saying the hard thing, letting people see me even when I didn't feel ready, especially then. This is about what happens when you stop waiting to be chosen and choose yourself instead. When you stop whispering and start living out loud. I was a quiet librarian. Now I teach people to speak, not perfectly, but powerfully. I used to think being quiet made me safe. If I stayed behind the desk, behind the rules, behind the shushing, no one could judge me. No one could reject me. But they also couldn't see me. And after a while, I stopped seeing myself too. It took me 70 years to say what I really think. Not just in jokes, but in truth. In standing up and saying, "This is who I am." It wasn't comedy that changed me. It was the courage to speak and to keep speaking even when it felt like too much. Even when I shook. I thought I was too old to begin. Turns out I was just old enough. And I'm not done yet. I'm just getting started. If this story meant something to you, if it reminded you that it's never too late to be fully seen, consider subscribing. It helps this channel grow. But more than that, it helps these quiet, honest stories reach the people who need them most. Have you ever surprised yourself by stepping into something new? Maybe later than you expected. And what's one truth you haven't said out loud yet, but want to? And if you're curious about what happens when someone walks away from certainty and starts listening instead, watch the story of a former pastor who found truth not in speaking, but in silence. It's called Why I Stopped Giving People Hope and Started Listening.